If you focus on your inner game, the outer game solves itself. If you want people to reach their economic potential, well, the first thing you got to do is to get them to stop thinking about economics. If your goal is to stay the same, there's no vision, you're not really leading anywhere. Well, you're leading people to what? Be the same.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Breakout CEO Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Holman. I'm here with Mike Chaput. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's so good to have you. Mike, you are the CEO of Endsight. You've been doing that for a while. It's a managed service provider, right? And I want to ask now, because we were just talking on the icebreaker questions earlier about family stuff. You've been doing, I have to do the math, but you've been doing Endsight for about as long as you've been married now. Like they're competing, aren't they?
Not quite. So the rough outline is I actually had a company that I was the CEO of before Endsight that was called PCS Networks. That was 4.5 years. It ended up going bankrupt. So Endsight was started in 2004. My company, the first company that I did, which was an IT systems integrator, that we ran from 2000 to 2004, and I was married in 2002. So, you can kind of put the pieces together there, but I was, let's say, partner, not married with my wife. We were, in a serious relationship since probably 98, I think was when we started to date seriously. So
that's fantastic. I've been married
since. She supersedes all of the business stuff, but the marriage kind of intersects in there.
I mean, she's still around. She's been through, I'm sure, the good and the bad. You mentioned a failed business or a bankruptcy. That's a tough time, and she's still here.
Ugly.
So
that's the good, the bad. That's the bankruptcy.
Yeah.
That's the ugly.
Yeah. Well, you're not the only one to go through it. So we'll talk today and maybe hear some of your thoughts about what you've learned along the way. But as we get into this, give the audience a little flavor about where Endsight is today. What what you're running, what you're managing, what it looks like.
So Endsight's in the IT managed services space. So if anybody doesn't know about that, it's a super highly competitive space. So think there are maybe 1,000 different companies that do what we do in every major urban area. Like in the Bay Area is one of our areas. There might be 1,000 different options. Most of them are incredibly small. There's a lot of 5 men and less shop, tons of 10 men and less shop, and in a handful of 20 people or less shop. It's dominated by small people. You can see this, and there's at one point in time, one of the major software companies went public, and so they shared their data in a public report. You could just see this like really weird curve where it's just like everybody's really small. In the last 5 years, the private equity people have come into the space. And so now what you have is this really strange dynamic where you have tons and tons of really small companies and a handful of really large national companies, which are really kind of acquisitions of, they're just basically a bunch of the small ones kind of compiled up into one national brand. Endsight is quite rare. We're not totally unique, but we're probably there. Maybe I've been in the industry for more than 20 years, and but there's maybe like 20 or 30 of us. So we're 140 employees, which is not big for a normal company, but for an independently owned managed services company, we're one of the largest in the nation. So that's really strange, but it's hard to grow in the space because, again, there's no competitive barriers to entry in it. It's unregulated. There's no capital barriers, so anybody can enter it. That makes it very difficult to scale. And so we're about 35 million in total revenues, 400 customers. And so, yeah, it's unique to be able to have, and we own our own capital table. So it's basically my business partner and I, my co-founder and I, pretty much we own the whole company between the two of us. So that's a little bit of the skeleton story on that.
You've been bootstrapping since before bootstrapping was in style, out of style, and coming back in style now.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole time.
So like bell-bottom jeans, it's coming.
Exactly.
Back in style again.
Yes. Well, that's fantastic. So why is it so rare in the industry that your size of business exists? Is it just too easy for people to split off once they feel like they can do what what the company they work for is doing? Or is it because the acquisitions have been sucking up people, past this point of operation? Like what makes it so unique?
So, I think it's, I think it's Michael Gerber who wrote the book about the entrepreneur seizures. Did you ever read that book?
Is it part of E-Myth? I don't remember the phrase.
The E-Myth. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I read that, it was like, oh yeah, that's our industry. So it's basically a bunch of technicians, who one day decided that they needed to run their own company. So you have these people with technical skills who are the founder CEOs of these companies, but they don't actually have all the disciplines necessary to run a great business. They don't understand finance, marketing, sales, operations, management. They basically know technology.
Yeah.
And so, and candidly, I don't want to insult anybody. Sometimes they don't even know that very well. And so,
and a lot of them don't want to know. They don't necessarily want to spend their time on running the business, right? That's not what they've done, not what they're familiar with. I think the legal industry that I'm in, lawyers are a lot the same way. You become a legal expert, but you're expected to someday to become, do business development if you're going to become a partner or whatever, if you start your own law firm. But until then, you get to just do the work, be the technical expert.
So there's even a problem on that dimension. So there's literally no regulatory barrier. There's no legal bar. There's no law school. So like to do what we do is just complete, utter Wild West. There's no code. If you think about like everything else, like, if somebody's going to set up a firewall, there's nobody's checking to make sure they're certified on that technology.
Yeah.
There's no code. There's nobody that comes in and inspects that it's properly done. It's just total Wild West. And the consumer is a bad proxy for quality. So what that means is that they choose on price way too often, which means that the low cost leaders who are doing poor quality don't just die. Like, you'd expect, well, if capitalism were working, then the poor quality people would just go out of business. But it's very difficult. And even when things go wrong, the consumer doesn't understand why. So, it's a gnarly place to compete on a lot of dimensions. And so to do it well and to do it right and to build a brand and to build a reputation and to scale customers and to scale employees and all that it's an incredibly difficult market with which to do it in. And so that's why so few people have done it.
Well, so let's go back to 2004 then. I mean, what was your story to get into it? If there's not really a barrier to entry, and I think we might be talking about barriers to entry later on in your story too, but if there's not a barrier to entry, tell me what prompted you to go into this industry? Was it something you've been working in, or was it an opportunity?
There's a crazy lead up, which I don't want to consume the whole podcast on, but when I was 24, I took an SBA loan and I bought a company with a partner, the same partner, by the way, that I run Endsight with now. And that was a technology integrator. So the idea, the revenue model was you would take other people's technology, I think Lotus Notes, for example, and then you would deploy it or integrate it into the customer's business. So it was the other name for these companies were value-added resellers. So you had to sell the technology and implement the technology and integrate it into the business. And for a bunch of structural reasons, it didn't survive. But we learned a lot about IT and we learned a lot about sales. So when the company didn't survive, we were kind of left without work and anything to do, but we kind of knew IT and we kind of had technology vendor relationships and we kind of knew the Bay Area marketplace. We were members of EO San Francisco. So we had a kind of a pretty decent business social network with which to kind of scrounge up customers. And we had the failed companies carcass, which had left some unmet demands that we might be able to figure out if they still needed help on certain demands. And so we figured out how to fashion a business together. It was super meager, it was like 5 of us. And we were basically just doing work for fee, is what it turned out. We were doing at that point in time, but very shortly after I met a guy out of Philadelphia who was just an incredibly early pioneer in this IT managed services space. And I met him at kind of an industry kind of peer function. And we actually shared financials, and I was just like, what is this? Like, how are you doing this?
So he was ahead of you on the financial curve.
Everything. Yeah. He had all this recurring revenue. And I was just like, what's going on here? So I begged him into letting me come and do a site visit at his office, just outside of Philly. And my business partner and I flew there and we did a tour, and we just completely decided to like burn the ships on the classic IT consulting business, which was just kind of paying our bills, and transform the business into the IT managed services space. And for a minute, it wasn't a high competitive business. There wasn't a lot of companies like this who were offering this model. So from like 2005 to like 2009, we were doing things different enough where the story was differentiating in and of itself. And then we started collecting customers, and we started growing a nice little business, and we did a lot of the early learning. And then, so by the time everybody entered that market, we were just a little bit better. We had been doing it longer. We knew the tools better. We had a brand, we had some recurring revenue. And then we just built the business, from there. But, yeah, that's kind of how it got started.
How big were you guys when the industry started to really develop, when people started coming in maybe in larger masses?
So by 2008, 2009, we had already grown the business. I want to say maybe somewhere in the like the 6 to 8 million in annual revenues, almost like it was all recurring. I mean, it wasn't all recurring. So you had these recurring contracts, but all of our project revenue came from the recurring services basis in a real kind of predictable mathematical way. We knew we were going to get 20% hardware and software attachment. We'd make 20 points on that. We knew we were going to get 25% attachment on professional services. And we could make a 50 or 60% labor loaded gross margin on the professional services attachment. We could math it all out. And then the whole business came about not churning the base and finding new customers to add on, which sounds simple, but it's actually quite challenging because the sales started to get really competitive. It was hard to differentiate. There was a lot of people coming in for low prices, and you're going to lose customers for, let's say, reasons that you can't control. They sell, or they have their own financial issues, and reasons you can control. I mean, it's you have people who make mistakes, and you make legitimate mistakes, and the customer gets frustrated and leaves. And so, you have to sort out your operations and constantly improve that while growing and accommodating and bringing on new people and training them. So, it's just a typical business mess, and you got to organize it all. And then to do that, from 5 or 6 million to 8 million to 10 million to 12 million to 15 to 16, all the way to 35 million is it's a grind, and you got to be good at a lot of things if you want to just kind of keep moving the ball forward. And mostly you have to be great at creating customer value, and you have to also be great at making it valuable for the employee to want to work with you, because you need the best people. And if you get the best people, you can create a lot of customer value. And if you can keep people motivated and keep customers happy, you can accomplish a lot.
I want to dig into the aspects of creating value for the customers and the employees. That I think that's an area we should talk about. But before we get to that, as you look back, I once had an employer when I was an intern coming out of engineering school. I worked at this firm where we designed, power and lighting for buildings and places. And I talked to the owner frequently because it was a small firm, and he said, Jeff, it was really easy to grow from 1 to 15 people. And it was really pretty easy to grow from 25 on, but 15 to 20, man, we started and restarted, and that kicked our butts trying to grow from 15 to 20 people. Did you have some times in there when you're like, man, it was so easy here. What's keeping us from growing in this stage? Did that happen to you?
100%. I couldn't tell you the exact number of people where ceilings were hit, but there's definitely, kind of like ceiling moments where you kind of get things organized for let's say a certain volume of business. And then to make it to the next volume requires changing your thinking, your philosophy, your identity. It requires taking risk, letting certain things go. There's a famous quote where it's like, and I don't remember the numbers, but it's like to go from 0 to 50 employees, you have to be willing to delegate all the stuff you don't like. But to go to like 50 to 100, you have to start delegating the stuff you like.
Oh,
And, that's like, that was true for me, because it wasn't hard for me to delegate the stuff I don't like, but then when I really did a lot of the sales, and I loved working with prospective clients. To me, it was just a problem solving exercise. I'd go in and I'd really identify what problems they were having, and I would know our solution set because, as part of building it, and I would just kind of match them up and say, hey, look, we can, all these things you described, our customers don't experience those problems, and here's why. And we'd close a new deal, and that felt very rewarding. I enjoyed the work. I loved making the new relationships. But I mean, eventually there's only so many, there's a churn rate that you just can't avoid. And if there's a sales rate that you can't surpass, you're going to hit a wall. So you have to essentially figure out how to build an organization that can do that same procedure successfully so that you can scale. And that's, that was one of the things that I had to learn. But it wasn't just me, right? We had operations people who were really good at things, who had to give up things to other people. And, you're doing this all across your organization.
What do you think? What do you think were some of the biggest, I don't know, learning moments for you going through that, where you're like, because you probably had this nailed. You're like, I can do this. I'm working, and I got this down. I don't know, where you went from delegating what you didn't like to delegating what you liked, or what were some of the shifts where you're like, I never expected to have to do this, but once I did it, you started to see the results.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of ways I could answer that question, but I think the way I want to answer it is, being a member of EO San Francisco was interesting. Mm-hmm. So I remember in 2002, I met Vern Harnish. If you don't know who Vern Harnish, he runs a program called Gazelles, and he has a book called Rockefeller's Habit. And most people nowadays, they talk about Gino Wickman's EOS. But my experience was like Vern Harnish was on to all that stuff well before Gino Wickman was. And he came up with this program called the One-Page Business Plan, which was basically the Vision Traction Organizer 1.0 now. And I learned about that in 2002. But at that time in my life, I was like 26 and we were in survival mode, and I couldn't process how to do core values and all this stuff. So we just kind of set it aside. We took that up, in with Endsight, and we started having this discipline of filling out what ultimately people refer to as a vision traction organizer, or if they like Rockefeller Habits, the one-page business plan. Mm-hmm. And we had a set of core values, and we had, 1-year targets, 5-year targets, and quarterly targets. And we had critical numbers, and, it was kind of, there was a discipline to it. We went off site every year to refill out this plan. And we did a quarterly regiment where we kind of like went off site, not like travel to, but like, for a day. And we thought we were pretty, like, we thought we were pretty smart, like we would tell people about it. We were proud of it. We'd promote the core values. I oriented everybody on them. There was a point in time where I realized that the values were wrong. And I realized that there were elements of the plan that we just couldn't really conceive of very well. Like, for example, the big, hairy, audacious goal. I was too young and immature to like properly understand that concept. But the values was a particularly important piece, because I remember reading, I think it was Built to Last by Jim Collins and Jerry Porras, I don't remember exactly what he said, but what I took away was something like, values should last the lifetime of the leader. And so, to come up with these values, Jeff, was really hard. Like we would go off site and we'd spend days arguing about them and running these exercises, trying to come up with them and trying to like argue about the words. Should they be this long? Should they be this? Should there be 5? Should there be 4? Yeah. And by the time we finally came up with something that the founding team and the lieutenants all agreed to, it was like, there was maybe nothing in the world I wanted to do less than go resort through that. Not to mention that I'd publicly, promoted these things to clients and to employees, and I had my reputation on the line. But there was a specific thing where I realized, like, this is wrong. This is like this. It isn't going to work this way, and it's in our way. The very values that we were so proud of, that we promoted, were antithetical to our ultimate goal, which we hadn't even well articulated, but we kind of knew anyway. And so that was a big thing, was like being willing to be humble enough to go back and retool that. And so one of the things I want to get across to maybe people who are, in a different spot in their leadership journey is, like, don't be so hubris about your values, like they're written on a stone tablet handed to you from God. Like, the way I look at it is, I kind of make things simple first before I make them complex. And I see the job of the CEO is kind of two dimensions first. And they're both complex dimensions, but the first one is kind of your business strategy, which I think is synonymous with vision, because, your vision is ultimately a description of the future state of your business. It's where you're going, and your strategy describes your pathway, how you're going to get there. So that's your vision. That's one half. The other half are, what are the philosophies, beliefs, and kind of behavioral norms that, if followed perfectly, would manifest that vision. That's the domain of values. So, like, if that's off the table, like, if you're not willing to, like, pivot or experiment with the philosophies and beliefs and behavioral norms, then
it locks up your strategy.
You can do then is try to make sure your strategy sandwiches into the values. Like, well, strategically, we're stuck with these, so we got to pick a strategy that might work with the beliefs and philosophy. And the other thing about it is, like, you should have values. You should be willing to be wrong on them, because you don't know any better. Like, you don't know that they're wrong until you know. Like, it took me getting new philosophy. Like, what changed for me specifically was I read Edwards Deming. I went to business school in 2008, and I took operations from a woman named Sarah Beckman, and she introduced me to the lean principles, like the Toyota way and all that kind of stuff. And I started reading Edwards Deming, and I just remember reading his 14 points of management. One of them, point 8, because I talk about this enough to know that it's actually point 8, is to drive fear out of the workplace. It's basically psychological safety.
Yeah.
And Deming's explained that if you want a high quality organization, then employees have to be the eyes and ears for leaders, which means they have to surface the problems. But if they're worried about reputational risk, and if they're worried about disciplinary action, they'll hide problems from leaders, and leaders won't need to do it. So at the time, two of our core values, one of them sounds so innocent, is have a sense of humor and take enjoyment for the day. Like, It sounds so innocent. Even now, as I say it, sounds like, well, how could that be a problem? Well,
sounds really positive. Sounds like we should all have positivity, right?
I'll explain it in a second. The second one that was a problem was take pride in your work. Also, like, it sounds intuitive, but here's how it manifested. It manifested in a rubber chicken that would hang on the cubicle of somebody who made a mistake. That's how it manifested.
So you would actually pass a chicken around and be like
every time there was like a mistake, like
it's kind of funny,
would go from one person's thing, and it was like a meant to be like a good humored way of, like, trying to, like, acknowledge that a mistake was made. And it was, but underneath that was like a kind of a disdain for mistakes. It was like, we didn't like them. That was the kind of the take pride in your work. And when
nobody wanted the chicken on their cubicle, did they?
The rubber chicken was like humor, was like at the apex of value. And what I learned from Edwards Deming is, if you want a high quality organization, by the way, which in managed services, if you want to scale it, you have to have quality, just because it's so competitive that if you can't produce a lot of customer value for the dollar, there's somebody else that's going to take that work. So what we needed was respect. That's what Toyota figured out with respect for people. So when you look at, it's okay to have humor, but it has to be subordinate to something higher, which in our case was respect.
So the humor,
you couldn't have humor if you couldn't use humor if it was disrespectful, period.
Yeah. It was misaligned.
And so, like, taking pride in your work was kind of also off the mark. And it became something like taking pride in how our work affects the people around us, our customers, our colleagues, and the societies we're part of. And we want to take pride in the impact of our work. And so, but the values were off enough that culturally we weren't gonna hit our milestone. We weren't gonna hit our highest potential. And so then, to go back and retool that meant going to work and being like, we still love humor, but it's not at the apex of value. It's not the philosophy and the beliefs and the behaviors that's going to take us where we need to go. And that meant a retool.
Yeah. How long had you operated with this set of values before you recognized?
More than a decade. More than
really? And it probably at one point felt like it was working really well for you.
Because having the thing about it was like we couldn't really figure out big, hairy, audacious goal. Like I didn't understand it. Like we couldn't see that far. So what we did instead was we set vision backwards. It's like, based on, let's say, a best case trajectory of what we think we can do, where could we be in a year? And then we'd set those targets and we'd be like, and if we did that for 5 years, where might we could be? And we'd set those targets. And it's like, that's
so you just
wrong.
Scaled up today's performance into
that's wrong, right? What you really want to do, is say, okay, if we could become anything we wanted to become, and all we had to do is declare it, what would that be? What would be our most audacious ambition that we would just love to see? That would be like something that would just be like, all we had to do is declare this thing. What would it be? Like, forget about time as a vehicle. And that thing must be something that we would be willing to sacrifice other idols on the marks to it. So for example, if our ambition was like to become $1 billion firm, let's say, then we would probably have to sacrifice owning our own capital table. Right. But that wasn't what our ambition was. Our ambition was to be the highest quality managed services provider in the world. Like we wanted to out quality everybody. And we had a definition for what that meant. And it didn't matter big or small. We didn't care. We wanted to compete with the small guys on quality and the big guys on quality. And we knew what metrics, like if we could see everybody's metrics, where we would have to win. And so that didn't require us to dilute our capital table, but it did require us to sacrifice other, let's say, sacred cows. And that, in this case, it was the values.
Yeah.
So, you have to be willing to sacrifice everything to this highest order goal. And that should be out in time such that you're not, let's say, lost by the pragmatism of it. Like, oh, there's no way. It's like, well, don't worry about the way. The way will emerge. Just pick your target. And then you start setting goals like, okay, if we were to get there, what would be a reasonable spot where we could become in 5 years? And if we were on track for the 5 years, what would we have to do in 1? And then in order to be at 1, what would we have to do next quarter? And how would we start solving these problems over time? And so you back into the vision versus trying to look at where you are and be like, wow, if things went really well, where might we be in a year? It's like, that's not quite right. You want to, and the thing about that, Jeff, is what's like the ambition of the goal is what creates the energy to achieve it. It's like small goals are not really that exciting. Like people will spend energy on something that's exciting. So you want your goal to be interesting enough where it'll
motivate,
cultivate the energy to manifest the goal.
Well, I love that. I love that statement. But I'm curious though, because I think a lot of people in your shoes, just projecting a little bit here, they would say to themselves, "Man, we've been operating for a decade. We got this system, core values. We got some goals we're working towards. We're making millions of dollars, whatever that is, in revenue." Like, I think a lot of people would say to themselves, "Well, I don't think we need to change." Like, what was the signal you had that said, "No, we got to reevaluate our values. We got to rethink how we approach our goal because we're doing bottom up, not top down, or whatever." Like, what did you see differently that maybe other people wouldn't have seen?
It's funny. I talk about a lot of the same things, but hopefully your audience is different enough where they haven't heard this before. But so I kind of, one of the other little tools I use to describe leadership and goals is there's the animating spirit of a prey animal. That's the limbic system. That's stress, it's protect. Then there's the animating spirit of the predator animal, and that's the goal-seeking system. That's the dopaminergic system. That's where our feel-good chemistry comes from. That's becoming. That's vision. So if your goal is to stay the same, you're definitely going to manifest the prey animal spirit because you're just going to protect what you have. And nobody's having any fun in that system. Nobody's challenged themselves to become something more. The highest order Maslow's thing we discussed in nobody's challenged themselves to be more. You're not challenging yourself to be more. There's no vision. You're not really leading anywhere. You're leading people to what? Be the same. Like that's not going to inspire anybody's best life, best performance, life's best work. Nothing like that.
So was it a lack of energy or a lack of excitement in the team? And you're like, what's missing here? Or
I mean, there's just something innately fun about building something. It's like playing with Legos or playing a video game where you're building something. Everybody wants to be a part of it. Your best people are going to go somewhere where they're building something. So if your goal is like, I just want to be the same because this is a good life for me, it's like, maybe so for you, but if you're a leader, there's a lot of other people and they want to go somewhere. They want to build something. They want to be part of something fun, something interesting. And if you can't provide them with that vision, then somebody else is going to provide them with that vision. You know,
and they will go somewhere else.
And you'll just be churning customers and churning employees. You'll be doing the same amount of work. You'll be in your limbic system all the time. You'll be stressed about every customer loss. You know, if you go into predator land, you're on the attack. You're in the dopaminergic system. You're doing something exciting and everybody's having fun along the way. And you tolerate your setbacks a lot better because, you know, you're in that predator animal land. All right, we didn't get that zebra. I use a herd of lions chasing zebras, but we're going to go on the attack to the next one. And everything's fine. You know, otherwise you're in that kick beehive land where everybody's going, you know, it's like chaos. Like the prey animal land is the land of chaos. And it's when zebras get attacked, they zig and zag and try to confuse, and everybody's confusion, trying to avoid the angry, you know, whatever is attacking them. It could be the leader, it could be a customer, it could be a colleague. People will invent problems internally so that there's some drama because they're bored. I just have a very strong opinion that if you want to be a leader, then take people somewhere, or don't be a leader. You know, like it's like, well, let somebody else lead. Like, if you want to stay in the same spot, then let somebody else be the leader.
Yeah. Had you seen this chaos in your team? And then, you know, once you sat down and figured out new values, new vision, new big, hairy, audacious goal, like did it bring order? Did it bring alignment? What was the impact? Just a quick note about our guests. I host the Breakout CEO podcast to share behind the scenes insights from scaling businesses. As an attorney, I see the real challenges leaders face long before success becomes public. But client stories have to stay confidential. So we invite guest CEOs to share their own moments of struggle and success. I'm so grateful to our guests and my team at Intellectual Strategies for making this show possible. Now, let's get back to the show.
I see chaos. Well, so let me take it a step back. So, you know, I like these vision traction organizer, one-page business plan as a tool, but I think a lot of people are using them without really understanding what they're doing. And because they're kind of useful and they're working, they're like, they declare victory on it, but it's better to understand what's happening. So your values and your vision are your uniting principles. They are what make your team a team. You know, that, like, because you can have people who have the same logo on their business card, but are not a team. They're just, they just get paid from the same place. They don't function as a team.
Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love Pat Lencioni, by the way. He's a local guy. He's here in Concord. My boys went to school at De La Salle, where his boys went. They played lacrosse with him. I also met him at a YE or an EO event at San Francisco back in the early 2000s. Brilliant guy. I've read almost all of his books. I think I've read all of his books. The Motive is absolutely fantastic. That's a great book on servant leadership. But anyway, yeah. And he also has one, by the way, called Silos in Politics, which is a similar kind of vein. But back to back to my perspective on it, the uniting principles, you can disagree on things below, but like if you disagree on where you're going, like what's your BHAG? If you disagree on that, you just need to be part of a different team. Like we can disagree about how the best way to achieve that BHAG is, but only to the extent that we're trying to get smarter about the strategic direction. And then we have to disagree and commit, because it's all about hitting the goal. It'll be like lions. When lions go after the zebras, they don't go after the herd arbitrarily. They actually pick one of the zebras because they don't have hands and tools, so they circle that zebra out like a target, and they get that zebra away from the herd, and then they go for the kill.
I think orcas do something similar, don't they?
Yeah. And so if you think about your team that way, like if your team is just chasing the herd, like I've got a better strategy. I want to go after the slowest zebra. I want to go after the oldest zebra. What about going after the funny looking zebra so we don't get lost? It's like, if you have 3 different strategies you're applying, your team isn't going to win. Like you're better off choosing a not perfect strategy that everybody agrees to. Like I'd rather go after a harder zebra if everybody were going after it together than 3 different strategies, but one of those strategies is let's say the optimal one. It's like your team alignment is much more important than let's say the optimal strategy. So what aligns the team? What is it that aligns a team? It's the shared ideology. It's the shared vision. It's the shared values that make your team align. Now, here's something very useful to know. We perceive the world in relation to our goal. So we don't even know what things are until we know what we're trying to do. Like we determine what's a tool and what's an obstacle in relation to what we're trying to accomplish. And we do the same for people. So we figure out whether somebody's a friend or a foe on the basis of whether they can help us achieve the goal. So our targets are aligning. And if they're shared, we can perceive each other as friends. So the interesting thing about people is they want community from work. Everybody thinks they want pay, and they do because they need money, but they're going to be there all day. So they want to work with people they like. They want to find play in work. There's other things that they want also from work. And one of them is community. And you can't really get community with just happy hours, because if people go to a happy hour with people that they hate, they see as obstacles in their way, they're just not going to talk to them in the happy hour, or they're just going to fight there. In my first company, the one that went under, I literally had to break up a physical fight between 2 employees.
Wow.
Like it was so dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So you like a happy hour isn't going to solve that. Like quality time only works if you perceive each other. If there's trust, that's kind of the baseline. That's Pat Lencioni. And then on top of that, you have shared ideology, and that would include the target, and that shapes the very perception itself. So as a leader, this work of creating the vision and values, I mean, it's the work. It's the leadership work. It's different than management. It's the work of a leader, and that's what a leader needs to do.
Well, so how have you achieved that with your teams then? I mean, is it a matter of going off and defining everything and then teaching people what what values you've adopted as a leadership and helping them to align to those? Or is it more about, finding people to bring on board that are already aligned so you don't have to realign them? Like what are the steps that you've taken after working for a decade under one value system, changing it? I mean, did the team react to that and say, whoa, what are we doing? Like this, I don't fit anymore. Or how did you manage that change?
There's a lot of a depth below that question. So let me hit maybe a couple points, and I'll see which one you want to dig into first. So the first question might be like, how do you come up with a good set of vision and values? I mean, that's like a really, really complicated question, but it's the tactics are reasonably understood. So the first thing you need to do is you need to understand who your most competent and loyal lieutenants are as the leader. Like you have to figure out like who's my first team, who's my best group of people. The second thing you need to do, and this is totally Patrick Lencioni, straight from 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, is you have to build trust amongst those people, and that comes from vulnerability. So that means that you have to be incredibly vulnerable. There's exercises. We use a exercise called the Lifeline, stole that from the EO or the YPO playbook, where we share the highest and lowest moments of our life. By the way, most people think vulnerability comes from sharing the lowest moments of your life, and that's true. But a lot of people don't share their wins because they don't want to be judged as being egotistical or arrogant. And so that's also a risky place to share. So when you do a Lifeline and you share the peaks and valleys of your life with other people, and you do it in a real sincere way, it can be the basis of people really understanding how you think and why you are what you are. And so you do an exercise where you can establish some basic human trust, where you come together, you drop rank, leader goes first, and you get vulnerable, and you develop trust. Once you cultivate trust, you kind of have to establish this idea of like, what could we become at our best? This is that BHAG. That's going to guide everything else. Then you need to understand what are the philosophical principles and ideas that are going to help us get there. Now, to do this well, nobody will like this very well, but you have to have good philosophy. That means you have to be well read. Like I said, I didn't have the philosophy of Edwards Deming when I first set the values, and that's why my values weren't good. So, but I've read probably at least 1,000 books on business leadership, and I've been to business school. So like the philosophy that's in our core value code isn't shallow stuff like, oh, my dad was a hard worker, so hard work. It's like, there's Kim Scott in there and her radical candor about connection. There's respect from the Toyota Lean. There's all these principles from Lean Thinking by James Womack, and there's principles. I mean, there's so many. Patrick Lencioni on service leadership. So there's a library of probably 30 or 40 books that unpack the principles of our core values. So you need to read a bunch of books, and you need to figure out which principles are going to help manifest your vision. And then it's an effort of distillation. So you have a library, then you have principles, and then you have values. And values have to be rememberable too. So like just as an example of how this works, at Endsight, the first extraction, which is really easy to remember but not meaningful, is RSVP. So like you won't forget that, but it doesn't mean a lot. But R stands for respect and connect. Okay. S stands for servant's heart. V stands for value, and P stands for progress over comfort. Okay. So now they're starting to get a little bit of like, now it's like a stick figure drawing. You kind of know what it means. You know, it's a human, but you don't really know a lot. Under each one of those values, respect and connect has like 5 or 6 we believe statements that describe specifically what it means. And then each of the bullets, there might be 1 or 2 books even that are the making of that book. So for example, in Servant's Heart, there's a bullet that says, a leader's purpose is to serve their team so that team members can serve their clients and each other. That's servant leadership. That's illustrated by Patrick Lencioni's book, The Motive. So if you really want to understand that bullet, it's really a distillation of an idea that's illustrated in an entire book. So as you grow in the leadership rank at Endsight, your expectation for fluency in the library, the canon of literature that makes up our philosophical underpinnings that are our behavior values, you have to get deeper and deeper into understanding the thought leadership behind them. So values they're not for the meek, they're not like, you can't just be like integrity. It's like, that's not going to do it. You need to really understand what the best business philosophies and how to align them with your strategy. So we knew, for example, at Endsight, because we're in a competitive market, that it was going to be customer value and quality were going to be the ways that we were going to differentiate, which means that we had to take playbooks from people who had operated in that kind of environment and run those playbooks excellent, and that there was cultural elements to the success of those plays, and so Yeah. So it's difficult. Like it's, there's no easy way to victory. It's just like anything. Like Steph Curry works really, really hard. And if you want to be a great leader, there's just no way around it. You're going to have to be really good. That means you're going to have to learn and dedicate yourself and set the tone that way.
How did you get on the same page with your team about this? Was it easy? They just said, yeah, this makes sense. Let's do this. Are they all readers? And so, or are you kind of leading the charge by saying, hey, I'm reading some books and I'm going to share them with my team. And, because at that level, you've got a lot of team members, and just making sure you're all in alignment on those goals is probably an achievement in and of itself.
So, yeah, it's funny because I started out as a CEO at so young. And when I say young, that's not really even what I really mean. What I mean is like totally incompetent and ignorant. Like I didn't know, I hadn't closed a sales deal. I hadn't negotiated anything. I hadn't managed anybody. I didn't understand how to read a financial statement. I was just completely ill prepared. So, but I had this hour-long commute to work and an hour-long commute home. So I started just taking in audiobooks.
Yeah.
And I just took in every audiobook that was available in Barnes and Noble, just one by one. And I would get reading lists from people from EO, and I would just read them. And I would be like, I would scrape the world. And when I would find a good one, I'd be like, you need to read this. And I'd, give my business partner the book, and then I'd give my managers, and then they would read it. And then we'd book club it. We'd be like, okay, what's there to learn from this? Is there anything to do about this? How can we use this idea? And is there action to take? Sometimes I'd get the paperback book and I'd go through with a highlighter. And it just kind of became part of my life. I was on the road. There was a ton of windshield time back in the, 2000, 2010 and 2010 to 2020. I mean, 2 decades basically, but just an enormous amount of windshield white time to sales calls. And I would just multitask, I'd be on these audiobooks and I would share them out and would talk to people about them. And of course, business school didn't hurt either. That was kind of a lot of dedicated learning time. And so anyway, so the bottom line was time plus effort means getting good. It's like, if you eventually you get to 10,000 hours or whatever Malcolm Gladwell's idea, where you become a true expert. And it, it's helpful if you have a lab, if you have a company and you're a team you're trying to lead, and you're seriously paying attention to the signals that's happening there. Cause like stuff is going wrong and what's going wrong. Like, I went a long time where it's like, what's going wrong? And I'd ask a question. I'd say, well, are we executing the values exactly as we believe that they are, should be? And if the answer is no, then we haven't either selected right, oriented right, or operationalized these values properly. Because if we were executing the values, the problem goes away.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like, no, we're executing the values perfectly. It's like, well, then and we're not manifesting our strategy. It's like, well, maybe the values aren't right, or they're not clear, or they're not comprehensive enough. And we need different philosophy. And it would be like, well, who could we talk to? It's like, well, who's doing what you're trying to do? And they're doing it better than you. They might know the answer. So you go and you try to find them. What books and mentors did you have? And you try to sort that stuff out, and you just grind, and eventually the solution emerges. Going back to goals, when you have targets, like this is another thing that's very useful to understand. If your life is different when you have a target, like what you'll pause on different things in your social feed, for example. Like what will catch your eye will be things that might help you with your target. So if you have a target, like your social feed will change, your conversations will change with other people.
Yeah.
It really changes what you pay attention to. So your targets are ultimately a force function of attention. The other thing is kind of weird is they kind of control your conscious, like when you're feeling like that nagging feeling, like, oh, I should be doing something different. What that is that your current action is at odds with your long-term, your proximal goals or your proximal attention's at odds with your long-term vision. And that's what it's, that's a Jiminy Cricket kind of thing. It's like telling you should be doing something different, but you won't even get that signal if you don't have the targets.
Yeah. What's the name of it? I'm blanking on the name where, you don't notice something, but once you speak it,
the RAS.
What's that?
The reticular activation system. It's called the RAS.
Yes. Yeah. And you're talking about that, but you're almost talking about the reverse of it. Like if once you have felt alignment, it's almost like you can feel when it's not there, I guess, right? You can say something's off. I like my RAS is, I'm unrazzed right now or whatever.
Yeah. You're not noticing what you need to do. You're not seeing the pathway forward. Like the pathways are there, and like, sure, there's like a, you might be like, oh, there's a genetic potential thing. It's like that's like hardly anybody's problem. Like that's might be a problem if you're trying to be the world's best basketball player. But like the vast majority of people, it's hardly their issue that they're doing everything right and they've just run into their genetic potential. Like how many people do you know who are doing everything right, but they just ran into their genetic potential? Like it's almost a limiting factor for nobody.
Yeah. We use 10% of our brain, right? And
so I don't really want to hear that very much. It's like you're capable of a lot more, and you know it. I don't even need that argument. It's like that you're capable of more. So like let's not talk about your, let's say, your genetic potential as being the limiter of why you're facing your problems. It's almost certainly not.
Well, I'm curious to take this in a slightly different direction. You mentioned there are probably only like a dozen companies out there like you who aren't, the really small ones or the ones that are, PE backed gobbling up the really small ones. Like, is there a reason that, like, is this where you want to be? You want to stand out in this place, kind of between the small and the really large? Is that the right place to be, or does it just depend? I guess what I'm really asking is, should other people who have 10 or 20 people on their team, should they be looking at PE, an acquisition someday as an option versus looking at growing into something like what you've grown it into? Or is it just, how do they approach that type of decision?
Well, I mean, I guess I could never presume to decide for anybody something like how, like what they're, this, the kind
what's
of
best for them. Sure.
But it's kind of the question is like, what should your capital strategy be? Should you own your own table? Should you bootstrap it? Should you VC it? Should you find a family office to partner with? Should you get friends and family? It's like I think it, the thing I'd like to say is your capital strategy starts in service to whatever your goal is. You should set a compelling goal that first puts juice in your own tank. Like it should be something that you're excited about. Our quality mission has really driven our company for the last, let's call it 8 years. And it was meant to be a 10-year vision. Like now what I'm thinking about is like, what's next for us? We are an incredibly high quality organization. And the next goal has to go through that dot. It can't, it's like, okay, what goes through that dot to something else? And interestingly, like for me, what I'm thinking about now for our company is something like when I was first in this business, I was a technology integrator. I kind of mentioned that we brought technology and put it into people's business. And then for the last decade and a half, let's say, I've been managing tech. I've been managing the tech stack, and it's been like making it secure, making it reliable, troubleshooting. We've been doing integration, but it's like, replacing computers and replacing wireless access points is like not that much tech. Like the volume of new tech that we've implemented has been slow and steady, such that the predominant value we do for our customers is manage what's there.
Yeah.
I think that's shifting. And
with
I think
AI, right?
is, I think AI is shifting it. I think there's going to be a bunch of new agents, the LLM. And I think what customers really need is a partner that is helping them translate their business problems in a way that the newest technology can solve it and can really manifest the next generation business. And the interesting part about that is like, don't do that with somebody who doesn't know support really well, because if you put a bunch of agentic AI in there and we don't know how to, when the LLM changes models and it breaks and you don't know what to do, and the company who put it in hasn't mastered service, you're hosed. So the service element, the managed services element becomes just as important, but it doesn't become the central differentiating factor that means a customer is gonna come to us. It's going to be because of our skill at integrating tech. And so we've had a business intelligence practice at Endsight for, the last 10 years, where we're really good with data. And it turns out that, like, what a great skill to have with the AI, because with AI, the first thing any kind of agent needs is it needs to have information, and the universe of information is too much. It needs to have your information such that it can do what you need it to do. And it needs to be restricted. It needs to be safe. It needs to be secure. It needs to be reliable. And you create an engine below. And so we launched an AI practice this last year to go along with our business intelligence practice. And I think that there's going to be a lot of business transformation that's going to occur. And so what am I excited about? Well, I'm excited about solving real market problems. It's like, and I think about them as really human problems. Like, maybe this will hit home, maybe it won't, but 200 years ago, the average life expectancy for a male was 35 years old. So, if you don't know, it's like 76 now. So we've doubled that and more. And the only way you can answer how is it's through technology and markets.
Yeah.
That's how we did it. It's technology and markets, and everybody's worried about AI, and they should be. There's going to be dislocations. I'm not saying there won't be, but we don't want to go back to a world where 80% of our workforce is spending time trying to make sure we eat.
Right.
And I think as we figure out how to deploy the next generation technology to humanity's problems, we're going to create more and more abundance. And so what's really exciting is to try to figure out how do we use what's there, that use machines and tools and tech to solve human problems so that we can have longer lifespans and richer lives, and we can do more interesting things, and we can build more interesting stuff. And so, that's what excites me. And I think if I were speaking to leaders, it's like, what real problem could you solve? Like, pick a real problem that, like, the market needs. Like, go after something that would make things better if you succeeded. Like, hey, look, like, society would be better, if I solved this problem. Like, right now, this problem is annoying for a lot of people, and if we solved it, it would be a big win for a lot of people. And yeah, you got to figure out the monetization strategy, but it's like, find something exciting to go off and work on. That's human oriented. It's a human problem underneath. Will there be a market there? Will it make money? Will it provide a return to your capital tables and put food on the plates of your employees? It's got to pass that test. But ultimately, it should be a real social problem, because, like roofing, like, that's a real social problem. It's a commercial business, but man, I'm glad my house is dry when it rains. And so, so every one of these businesses are solving some kind of serious commercial problem, and they're social simultaneously. So that that's how I'd look at it.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because I think what I've seen is a lot of people, especially in the, when you're talking about innovation and people inventing new things that I deal with, there's been this shift almost to, bootstrap so heavily that you only build small things, a tool that's so niche that it solves a problem so that you can, use it and scale it fast and sell it off for a little bit of money. It's not, it's not humanity focused. It's almost like project focused. And I wonder, as we get into this, if the real learning is what you're saying, where AI comes in and it is the tool to make things faster, but the real value is going to be when we get past these small project orientations and we get into who's going to make sure the human element is still there in the midst of AI, and how that works. That's going to be the key. At least I think. Is that consistent with what you're saying?
Yeah, I think there's another thing that you're talking about too, which is that, like, the business is a economic game. It's like it's It's an economic game all the way around. Everybody who's playing it the score is denominated, and it's denominated in dollars. But dollars on their own there's a big distance between dollars and, let's say, a good life. And you would have to say, well, what's the difference? It's like, well, I think what makes a good life is, I mean, there might be some degree of like comfort, which, and safety, but ultimately comfort and safety, it actually doesn't really make for a good life. Like, I think there's a lot of great philosophy around why, but so then what does? It's something more like meaning and purpose. It's a community and connection. Those are what make for a good life. And there's no reason you can't have it all. Like, there's no reason why you can't get economic returns and simultaneously get community, relationships, meaning, and purpose. And in fact, my whole ethos is it's actually easier to make money when you consider and put forth first those more idealistic things, like and of course it is. Like, it's really obvious if you think about it. So when I was a younger CEO, and my motives were immature, it was like they can be a caricature of something like financial safety and security, so I can take care of my family. Very me centric, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe worse, it would be like, I don't want to be dominated by a hierarchical power structure, like in my family childhood of origin, or like in the corporate world where I worked before. Or third, like maybe I want to prove something to my dad, like these kind of immature motives. Like, but just think about, are you excited about those things? Like, no, nobody would be. Like, so like for me to lead a group of people so that I can fulfill those really selfish, self-centered motives, all I'm doing is cultivating a bunch of self-centered motives for everybody below me. And that's putting everybody in limbic land, because I'm in limbic land. I'm in that prey animal land. I got safety, good protect. So if I can transcend as a leader into something more idealistic, more mission oriented, more social oriented, more community and connection centered, then what I do is I disrupt all of the cynical reasons why people don't want to follow. Because like they're, it's like all those things is they're signaling off of the self-centered leader. So it actually makes it easier to scale a team when you're less focused. And this is the ironic part too. It's like economics. Okay, so let's take the boots on the ground people who are doing the day in, day out work at Endsight. How are they going to make the best career, make the most money possible? The answer is their performance. If they have a great performance, they create a bunch of customer value, it's going to be easier to pay them more. So are they going to get better performance if they're economically driven, or if they love the job, they find purpose in it, they find play in it?
Well, you think it's economics, but it's not, at least in my experience.
It's not experience, by the way. Now it's actually science. So, and it was Doshi and McGregor in their book Primed to Perform, where they studied this. They set out experiments, and they determined that the play motive and the purpose motive were correlated to very high performance. And the next one was potential. That's like the becoming. I'm doing this as a stepping stone. And the three that were correlated to terrible performance were emotional pressure, economic pressure, and inertia. So we know that economic pressure and emotional pressure are correlated to negative performance, and play and purpose are correlated to high performance. So in a grand irony, if you want people to reach their economic potential, you have to cultivate motive that transcends economic and emotional pressure into something like play and potential and purpose. So that's you want your people to do better economically? Well, the first thing you got to do is to get them to stop thinking about economics. Let economics come to them. You can see this, by the way, in sports. Like the best players, like they love the game. They make the most money too, but they love the game. The ones that are there who are there for the money, you could smell it, and they might be really, really talented, but they're never going to be the best of the best, even if they have the best genetics. So it's very difficult, by the way, to perform well over time if you don't have a play as a source of motive, because it's just draining. Everything you're doing is draining, and you're constantly seeking to do something else. But it's also, in a grand irony, you could make more money, but you're going to spend it trying to make up for the fact that you hate your job.
Yes, I see that in my field quite a bit.
So if you love your job, you can actually afford to, like, you can afford to have less money, but you end up having more because you love your job, and that makes your performance higher. So it's it's a little bit of a mind trip, but you really, as a leader, if you can transcend your own immature sources of motive, you're gonna make it a lot easier for your team to achieve their best potential, and that's gonna help everybody.
Well, you've got my mind spinning a little bit here, thinking through all the stuff you're saying, and I wonder if some of our audience members will say, "Man, that it makes sense. Where do I start? How do I?" I mean, Mike's way ahead of me in terms of reading and business, and I'm for like where would they start to come down to get onto the path that you're on? Is it read more books? Is it reevaluate your vision and values? What are the steps somebody should think about, the major milestones to say, I want to follow this. I want to be a better leader. I want to create better culture. Where do I start?
I'm writing a book right now where I'm kind of putting together all these ideas and some kind of coherent with a bunch of other things. But one of the concepts I talk about in the book is this. I don't know if you know this, probably you don't. This is like a real subtle part of marine nautical things. But inside of a big ship, there of course there's a rudder.
Mm-hmm.
And if you turn the rudder, the ship turns, right?
Right.
But inside the rudder, there's something called a Becker rudder.
Okay.
And a Becker rudder is inside the rudder, and it opens up one way such that the water flows so that the rudder turns. So the rudder itself and the Becker rudder are hacking fluid dynamics so that you can, with the steering wheel, you're not actually controlling the rudder, you're controlling that Becker rudder. And so what you want to really understand is, like, what's the littlest thing I can do to move this entire ship? Like, what's the most effortless way? What's the Becker rudder version of this? And it's a great place to close because it's also where we started. That's with yourself. You want to become a better human being, and you can put a lot of attention. You can put a lot of attention to that because you're essentially your patterns and your habits. I mean, and if you change your patterns and your habits to something more productive, everything else is going to start falling around that. And so you've got to have an idea of what you want to be and what you want to become. And if you don't know that, that's a problem. Like, you're what my kids call an NPC. You're a non-player character.
Yep.
You're a character in somebody else, somebody who knows what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
So how do you add intentionality? Well, you need to create an individual vision statement. You need to start there. You need to start with something. It's like, what do I think the best version of myself? Who do I think the best version of myself is? When am I at my best? And then where am I trying to go? What am I trying to become? And that's the basis for your own individual affirmations and visualizations. And the other thing that I would put out there is just like, control your body, control your mind. Most people, they're like, yeah, I know what I need to do. I can't get motivated to do it. It's like, okay, well, like, you could start with something really simple. You could just choose to move more than you're moving. Most people need to move more. And if they could get a win by having the discipline to move a little more, they start getting confidence in other elements of their life. This is like, there's a bunch of science around this too.
This is make your bed in the morning, or get your steps in, or one of those things where you're putting more motion and routine into your life. And
then there's like habit stacking on that too. You could stack one, but the other big one here is like shrink the change. Like, I hear people like, I know I should read more, but I'm not motivated to do it. It's like, well, could you sit in a chair holding a book?
Yeah.
I'm being dead serious about that. If that's all that you're capable of doing right now, then go sit in a chair for 2 minutes and hold a book, and do that for as many days in a row until you start opening the darn thing.
I was going to say maybe read a paragraph, but you're starting even more basic. Hold the book.
Like hold the book. You know, when I went to business school, I used to have these big giant case readers full of stuff. And it was like, I was running a company at the time and I had 2 small kids and it was like more than I could think of to go through. I knew I had to read these case readers. It was going to make the classes way more interesting. So I would literally do this. I'd say, you don't have to read the case, but you do have to go make yourself a cup of tea and go sit in a chair with that case reader and nothing else. I'd go get tea. I'd go sit there with the case reader with a chair and I would literally do nothing else. And then all of a sudden I would be like, oh, I could just open it up and start. Then the next thing you know, I'd read it and then I'd be reading and then, you know,
then you're
I'd
engaged.
Then I'd be engaged and then things would happen on their own. But you got to shrink the change. You got to shrink the change to what you're willing to do. And you are your own Becker rudder. You know, it's an inner game, not an outer game. Like everybody's looking for, oh, I got to figure out the new market and the new, you know, I'm in the wrong market. I've got the wrong product fit. It's like, you know, you're probably where you really need to, you're the Becker rudder. You know, you probably need to get a little bit more movement in. You probably need to do a little bit more mindfulness. Do you have a gratitude practice? Do you have affirmations that you're doing? Are you visualizing your future? Like if you focus on your inner game, the outer game solves itself. And so the best advice I could give anybody on this thing is think of themselves as the Becker rudder of their life and focus on their inner game and let the outer game, you know, let it emerge. Like if you start reading, you're going to get better philosophy. And if you get better philosophy, you're going to have better values because they're just a derivative of your values. And, you know, it's like, and you'll have a better strategy because you'll be able to, you'll start getting a better network. All kinds of things will change, but I would start with the inner game.
I love this, Mike. You've given us so much to parse through and think about. It's clear that you've been thinking about these things for decades, and I'm excited to see the book come out and read a copy of it when it's ready. What's the book called? Do you have a title for it yet?
My working title is Broken to Built Right, and the idea there is, you know, kind of the story of
the life of every entrepreneur, right?
Yeah. That's the working title I'm doing. I don't know if I'm going to keep it all the way to the end. I got to finish the book and then figure it out. But the concept is kind of neat. I'm telling like really like narrative rich, you know, sensory detail stories about my career. So it's going to be like, you're going to follow me as a main character in a story. Some of them will go back to childhood, early career, but after each one of those chapters is a diagnosis of a principle. So what would the principle be? So like, you know, I talk about childhood of origin story, then I might, you know, my second chapter would be something like, how do you transcend childhood of origin kind of trauma or emotive? Like what, you know, so it would be things like we talk about there. It's like, you can't, you know, your behaviors are a product of the narrative structure you put about your life. And if you want to change your behaviors, you need to kind of go back and really think about what the meaning is behind things that happen to you and take some ownership of that and look at it more holistically. And so, you know, then I'll tell a story about my career at TI and I'll talk about kind of bureaucracy and politics and how that informed, you know, some of my beliefs as a later leader, you know, and I'll basically kind of walk through some stories and some principles, and hopefully people will be entertained and they'll also kind of learn something. It'll be like part story, part lesson, and that'll be a nice balance. I'm also launching a podcast. So if you like these ideas or if they appeal to you and you're interested in my podcast, you can find that at mikechaput.net. Okay, now that'll take you to a page where you can subscribe. My podcast is going to be, it's all in person, high production. And just in my 25 years of being a member of YPO, 400 customers, business school, there's just the professional network is really, really humblingly good. Like the people who are willing to come and spend time with me to talk about this stuff is amazing. And we're unpacking all kinds of leadership stuff. You know, we're talking about, EOS, but we're also talking about lean, but we're also talking about people's stories or entrepreneur stories. So we're finding out their lessons. And then I present some of my ideas. And so I get real-time feedback. So a lot of the ideas that I have I'm working them actively with my guests, and that's a lot of fun.
And that's
so you can catch that there
at mikechaput.net, you said.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. We'll put that in the show notes. Well,
and Jeff, one last thing before I want to first thank. I mean, this has been an hour and some time here.
Oh, I don't know. It's been a good conversation. It has been a little. I've gone over your time, I think. So
yeah. Well, I just if people made it to the end of this, I just want to first of all thank them for their time and attention. I think if you haven't gathered, I think the attention was like an Egyptian god. Like they built a sanctity around attention that was symbolized by the eye, because the eye is actually kind of approximate. Like you look at things that you're giving them attention to, because it's so important. So if somebody's given the show attention, I think, or giving me personally attention, I really want to express gratitude for that. But then there's always this ask, and it's I've been on maybe 15 podcasts, and it always feels a little uncomfortable, but I want to do it instead of the host, because I'm the guest, and it's tiresome to do it as a host. But like, if you watched all the way to the end of this episode and you haven't liked or subscribed to this content or shared it with somebody or commented or engaged, you have to know that the way that the internet and everybody else figures out what's good and bad is by the early consumers of this. So it needs that affirmation. And so it's like a duty. It's a duty to be like, hey, I endorse content that's good.
Yeah.
And so if you thought this was good and you haven't endorsed it, you're kind of like not even doing your duty. Like you really have to do this. And you're worried. I know why, all the reasons why you're worried about doing it. Like, oh, I don't want to be like bombarded with a million. It's like, but it's kind of like the price you pay. We don't get paid for this. It's basically free. And we're trying to pay things forward. So the price is, like the content, share it, comment. Super frustrating to always have to do that, but that's really what's necessary. And if we don't want our entire social feeds to be just like littered with content that's designed to manipulate us through arousal based algorithms, then we have to fight against that as a community and try to get great content out there. And so anyway, I just want to make that appeal. And I also want to thank you for having me on and for your time.
Oh, you're such a gracious guest. I really appreciate that. And liking and giving reviews, that's all very much appreciated. And we do appreciate also the attention that our listeners have given to this. It's been easy for me to give attention to it, because you've got so many good concepts that I think apply to people that are either looking to build a business or have been building a business for a while and they're taking it to the next level. Like, I think there's a lot to take away from this episode. So Mike, I really want to thank you for taking the time and energy and bringing all of your insights from the last several decades into this conversation.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And to our audience, thanks for joining us one more time on the Breakout CEO podcast. Be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you enjoy the show, a rating or a review goes a long way. Our mission is to promote the stories of breakout CEOs in scaling SaaS, e-commerce, and tech companies to equip peer CEOs with valuable perspectives and confidence. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of The Breakout CEO. I'm Jeff Holman, and I'll see you next time.